So back in 2011, for the first time in my life, I left my home country, got on a plane, and I flew to the United Kingdom to study abroad for the next year. Ever since that experience, I've been obsessed with traveling and seeking out opportunities to live abroad. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about some of the life lessons that I've learned along the way traveling to over 20 different countries. One of the biggest lessons I have ever learned traveling is just how to be independent, and all my experiences traveling abroad have really taught me that I am a very capable person who can survive in so many different situations. You know, when I can't speak the language, I have no idea where the heck I am, and there's just so many things that I have had to go through, I guess, in my travels, that at this point in my life I feel like there is nothing that I cannot do, and there's no country or situation I can put myself in that I cannot, I guess, maneuver myself through. When I first began traveling, I felt like I had no idea what to expect. I didn't realize like how different or similar another country was going to be, and the more I traveled and experienced like countries that are really similar to my home country and countries that are vastly different, I feel like it really taught me this ability to be flexible and to adapt. And honestly, when you're traveling by yourself, like, that is the most independent experience you can possibly have. This is really a test of your ability to cope, to adjust, to problem solve, and to deal with situations that are just completely out of your comfort zone. And the fact that I have lived through so many of these experiences, I feel pretty confident in myself and my ability to survive wherever I go. When you're continuously forced outside of your comfort zone, you get much more comfortable with the uncomfortable, if that makes sense. You know, you can't avoid these situations. You can't just avoid talking to people because you're afraid to use a different language, or you don't know how to communicate with people, because oftentimes you're communicating with people about something that you need to do, like you're buying tickets at a museum, or you need directions because you're lost. In many ways, if you are in a situation where you have to try and speak in another language, it's unavoidable that you might embarrass yourself and you might say something that will have people shaking their heads like, what is this girl on about? That's not to say that I still don't feel like discomfort in a lot of situations. I do. It's just you get used to constantly challenging that line of where your comfort ends and where discomfort begins, because you can't really retreat back into the way of life that you're used to, because you are literally in another country, in another way of life. A good example of this from my own experiences is when I went to China. There's almost always squat toilets in every bathroom. Now in South Korea there are also squat toilets here, but I feel like while living in Korea you can easily avoid squat toilets and you can use like a proper like sit down toilet, and I've rarely seen moments where you had to use a squat toilet. And usually in those instances, I just didn't use it because I thought, I don't really want to use the squat toilet. I'm not gonna start today. But when I was in China, it felt completely unavoidable. It felt that most bathrooms only have squat toilets. So in my time in China, I was forced to use a squat toilet. Now for some people in the world, and maybe some of you watching this, that might not be weird, or that might not be something like unfamiliar to you. But for me, coming from the United States, we don't use squat toilets. So for me, this was just unfamiliar and something I wasn't comfortable using. And you know, now that I'm in another country where they primarily use this type of toilet, now I'm using this type of toilet. Sometimes when things are uncomfortable to you, it's just more or less that they are unfamiliar to you. And when you go to other countries, there are things that people in this country are familiar with and you are not. And that's just the reality of travel. After traveling to multiple countries, I started to realize that a lot of the souvenirs and little knickknacks and stuff that you see for sale really aren't that special. And I started to notice that a lot of these things are almost the same depending on the country you go to. Typically when people travel, they like to pick up souvenirs and little mementos, but I found that when I did that, after several trips overseas, several different countries, I started to feel like these mementos just sat in a drawer, sat on the shelf somewhere, and it wasn't really these mementos that I actually valued from these trips. It was the experiences that I had on the trip, the people that I met, the delicious food that I tried. And I started to think about what about travel did I really enjoy, and it was about the experience. It was about the adventure. And if you're traveling, you're really only able to bring with you whatever you can fit in a suitcase. So you start to get accustomed to living with less. Also for me personally, I have an experience of moving abroad twice in my life, and in both instances, all I could bring with me was whatever I could fit in my suitcases. Especially after living in South Korea, when I first came here, again, I only had 3 suitcases. And after years went by, I started to forget about all of the possessions and all of the things that I left back in the United States. So currently at this moment, I almost own nothing in the United States, and I own a lot less now than I probably did my entire life in the United States. The reality is, if I leave Korea and go back to the United States, I also can't bring the majority of my possessions with me again. Thinking about this and about how I've been able to move abroad, leaving a lot of my things behind, I started to realize that things are just things, and it's those experiences in life, those experiences in travel that really matter. I would say more than knickknacks and random mementos, the thing that I value the most is photographs, documenting the experiences that I have had. Honestly, this mindset of valuing experiences over possessions has also turned me a little bit into a minimalist, because I really do feel like having stuff isn't that meaningful. And if I were to have stayed in the same place my whole life, I probably would not have had these opportunities to let my stuff go. When you think about people from other countries, other cultures, just different backgrounds even within your own country, I think people tend to look at these people and they sort of other them a bit. Because there's no sense of empathy or understanding where this person comes from. You just think, this is what I know as normal, this is what I know as life, this is how I grew up, you know, this is everything that I know is here, and this person, I can't relate to them. I have no idea where they came from. I don't understand like anything about their native language and things like that. There's nothing wrong with coming from different backgrounds, but I think that when people have this disconnect where they don't have the same backgrounds and they don't have experiences interacting with people from other backgrounds, I think it's really hard for them to feel a sense of connection with that person. Now, I find that kind of a shame, because I find it so enriching and so exciting to learn about different ways of life, different religions, different cultures, different languages. I think it's just so cool, and the only way you're going to learn those things is if you talk to people who have those experiences. So if you stay in the same place your whole life, I feel like you can have those experiences, but they are going to be harder. When you're traveling overseas, you're forced to meet people from totally different backgrounds, from totally different cultures. It's actually a great opportunity to learn about the world and to learn about other perspectives, other religions, other languages, other cultures, etc., etc., etc. There's so much power in a face-to-face conversation. We might have different backgrounds and perspectives about the world, but at the same time, we're just people. We're capable of love, we're capable of hate. You know, at the end of the day, we're just the same person, but just in a different place in the world with maybe different ideas about what we value in life. This has really carried over into my ability to understand different sides of an argument and to see different perspectives as valid. This is something that I feel like is so important when it comes to even politics within my own country, being able to understand different opinions and different reasons why people think a certain way. You know, maybe this group has come to think this way because of these experiences and things like that. After all of these experiences, I feel like I have come to empathize more with other people, including people who think differently than me. There is a huge difference between traveling and living overseas. Now, granted, I understand that a lot of people in this world do not have the opportunity to travel overseas, let alone live in another country. So I recognize that by talking about this is something that might not be accessible to everyone, but I just want to explain how there is a different mindset that I think people have when they're traveling versus when you're living abroad. I don't think that you necessarily need to totally live abroad to have that same mindset, but let me explain what I mean. So oftentimes when people travel, I think they'll go to somewhere like France. Okay, Paris is a great example. They'll go see the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe, and maybe try macarons or I don't know, whatever touristy things people do, right? I feel like when you're traveling overseas, you want to see all of the major sites and try all of the staple foods. And when you're living overseas as well, you have that same, I guess, mindset, but you're also experiencing more of like the day-to-day life. So for me, even if I don't have the opportunity to live in every single country that I visit, and I'm sure a lot of you don't have that opportunity, I try to take this mindset when I'm traveling of just have a casual week there. What is life going to be like if I was in this country and had like a week off of work or something? I don't know, maybe this is a weird mindset, but for example, the last time I went to France, I didn't really go and look at a ton of tourist attractions. I went to a local mall and did some sightseeing. I went to a bookstore. Granted, I speak French, so like that was also why I went to the bookstore. But I went to the bookstore, I looked at books, and I walked around the streets. I tried out some restaurants. I tried out some food. I went and bought some cheese. I went to the grocery store and I picked out foods to cook in my Airbnb. So sometimes I didn't even go out to restaurants. I actually just made food for myself. Also, I feel like, is it really cliche to be like, oh, what do the locals do here? What is the local life like? I think, I'm not really trying to sound that way, but I feel like I might be sounding that way. But I guess my point is that I've traveled so much that I kind of feel burnt out from looking at all the tourist attractions and stuff. I'll have a little balance of seeing like some of the major sites. Like if you're going to Paris and it's your first time ever in Paris, of course you should go and see the Eiffel Tower. But I also think like it's worthwhile to blend in these other experiences of just going to the grocery store, going to like a market and buying food, like things like that, you know? So I don't know, going forward in my life, I still like traveling, but I don't really want to just travel and go to so many different countries for short stints. I actually think that going forward, if I'm going to travel more, I want it to be through experiences living abroad, because I found that those experiences were just much more valuable. This might be an odd topic, but throughout my life, I kind of struggled with my cultural identity. And I think it's a little bit odd because I'm not a third culture kid. I'm not someone who grew up traveling. I pretty much lived and was raised in the same place up until my early 20s. But when I was young, I never just felt like super American. And I always kind of struggled with this, I guess, cultural identity of feeling like I didn't belong. I felt kind of like the black sheep in my family, and in the area that I grew up, I just felt kind of different. To be honest, when I was in college, a lot of friends and people around me actually told me that I didn't seem very American to them as well. So I think it's not just me, but other people around me just kind of thought that like there was just something different about me. I don't really know. So when I got the chance to go to the United Kingdom, I kind of felt excited. I felt like it was a chance to break out of that and to get out of America and experience something different. And for me, I just thought, oh, maybe I'm more aligned with some other culture or some other country out in the world, who knows? And I think because I really leaned into that experience and I loved England, I probably would have stayed there several years after if I didn't have to go back home to go to school and finish my degree. I think that's also why a lot of people were like, you're not really American, because I came back and I was like, oh my god, I want a cup of tea, and you know, why is there no milk to put in my tea, and all these, you know, weird things. I think I kind of missed my life in England a lot, and I think people saw that around me and they're like, oh, you're not really American anymore. But in reality, I probably was very American, because I feel like if I told my English friends at that time, like, oh, I'm not American, I'm English, they'd be like, no, you're not English, you're definitely American. So it was like, I think it was just the way I was and my mindset that gave people this impression, because as I've gotten older and living in Korea, especially because Korean culture is so different from American culture, I've started to really see what areas, I guess, what parts of me make me truly American. And I've come to the realization that I just might not be the same type of American as my family or as the place that I grew up. And maybe if I had stayed in the United States, I might have actually moved away to another part of the country where I felt like was more my style, and maybe I would have also gravitated towards different people who also just fit my vibe, so to speak. And the truth is, people aren't a monolith. I mean, obviously there's so many kinds of people in America, and I think what was happening was just I was in a very specific family in a very specific location, and I just felt like I did not fit into that style of American, if that makes sense. But there's so many different ways that you can be American, or, you know, whatever country you're from, and you're not necessarily going to be the same as the people around you. I think honestly it took me traveling to a country and living in this country that is very different from my home country to really be able to see the parts of me that are American and how I am American in my own way. That has really helped me just like solidify and have a clear understanding of my cultural identity, whereas I didn't have that when I was actually in my home country. I think one of the reasons why I never felt that American when I lived in the United States was I also just kind of am not the most conventional person. When you travel and you experience different cultures and different people and different ways of life, it really gets you to start thinking outside of the box. Things that are normal in your home country and like the way people go about their life in your home country is not going to be the way people go about their life in other countries. And you start to see that there are other ways of doing things. There's other ways of thinking. You might think, you know, doing something this way is the right way and everyone should do it this way. This is obvious. Like, why would someone do it differently? But you go somewhere and no one does it that way and they're like, what's wrong with you? Why do you do it that way? You're crazy. Why aren't you doing it this way? Because in their mind, this is the way that they were taught and this is the thing that they know. And you're different, just like they're different to you. I find that over time, I have cherry-picked the parts of other cultures that I like to the point that I feel like I've kind of meshed it all together in like, I like this and I like that and I like this. And it's not all American, and it's just little things that I've picked up from different cultures and places I've been. I have come to create my own different perspective on the world, and I guess in a sense you can call that thinking outside of the box. I think from a young age, I always saw the world in a very particular lens, but all of my time traveling has really just validated those thoughts and really given me the courage to say, yeah, I don't necessarily always want to do things the way that everyone else, you know, where I'm from is doing it. And that's okay, because there are people around the world who are also not doing it the way that Americans do it. You also might not know this, but before I went and studied abroad in the United Kingdom, I was actually in school to become a doctor. Then my study abroad experience, my opportunities to travel around Europe and to just experience other parts of the world and other ways of life. After that, I went back to the United States and I was like, I do not want to be a doctor. I do not want this path. I do not want a, I guess, conventional linear career path. Since then, my perspective on life and my career has totally changed. Rather than, I guess, climbing a ladder or following a certain path to success, I view life as just a series of choices that lead us to the next chapter in our life, and we can't really know how the book is going to end, but we can at least think about the next chapter and what we want next in our life. And for me, that sometimes means my life is more like this and that and all over the place and crazy, and I'm totally okay with it. And I would not have come to this realization, I would have not adopted this mindset, this acceptance about who I am, if I never had these opportunities to travel or live overseas. If you're watching this right now and you're like, I would love to go and travel overseas or live overseas, but I don't have the financial means and I don't have the ability to do so, trust me, I was in your shoes back when I was younger, and my advice to you is to just get out and explore the area that you're from and the area that you live in, because I guarantee that there's so much about the city and the place that you live that you probably don't even know about. These are some of the life lessons that I have learned traveling overseas. I'm curious to hear about you guys, what you have learned or experienced in your travels. Please comment them down below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!